The lack of electricity has been identified as one of the stumbling blocks to development and economic progress across the continent. Different countries are trying to find solutions to the electricity gap, which leaves over 640 million Africans with no access to electricity. This is an electricity access rate for African countries at just 40%, the lowest in the world. Many efforts across the continent have not fully paid off as expected. Today, we're looking at some of the efforts in Africa's largest economy in East Africa, Kenya. Now, despite efforts to diversify and revolutionize the distribution and generation capacity in Kenya, payment of the supplied power has been an issue, and yet the lights must stay on. This week, Kenya Power has written off 15 billion Kenyan shillings in bad debts from unpaid electricity bills, most of which have been outstanding for more than 3 months, adding that it is only confident of collecting half of its pending power bills that are uncollected by up to 3 months. Meanwhile, the state-owned power distributor has borrowed a loan of 6.75 billion Kenyan shillings from NCBA, pushing the bank to become the biggest local lender to the state entity. NCBA provided the 12-year loan on October 9, 2020 at an interest rate of 12% with a repayment date of October 3, 2032, according to details in the latest annual report by Kenya Power for the year ended June 30, 2021. The lender now joins other local lenders such as Standard Chartered Bank, which is owed 6.1 billion Kenyan shillings to be repaid by June 23, 2023, and an Equity Bank medium-term loan of 4.1 billion Kenyan shillings to be repaid by September 2025. Kenya Power has also borrowed commercial loans from the governments of Kenya, the Rand Merchant Bank, Stanbic Bank, and other development agencies, a total debt burden of 106.9 billion Kenyan shillings as at June 30, 2021. Can Kenya Power afford to let go of these debts? What financial position does this decision put the company in? Today, we're focusing on Kenya Power's risky debt gamble. I'm Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. And joining me from Kenya now is Ken Gichinga. He's the chief economist for Mentoria Economics. Ken, welcome to the show again. Thank you so much for obliging me on a New Year's Eve.
Happy New Year's Eve in advance, Tolulope.
Thank you so much. So let's get into this. We can see that the issues with Ken Power, unfortunately, are reminiscent of the issue that many state-owned electricity firms across the continent have. But how did Ken Power get to this point? Why is it in this financial situation now?
Well, the truth is that in the next 1 week, Kenya Power will be marking its 100th anniversary. And in that sense, it should be the best form of management that's possible in Kenya. It's older than the country of the Republic of Kenya. So one would expect it to really behold the finest type of management. But what we've seen in Kenya Power really is quite the opposite. It's been bogged by huge corruption issues. The procurement laws are highly broken, and it continues to be really debunked really by the banking sector that continues to extract huge interest payments from it. So we do hope that with the new management that has been put in place, that we might see the true Kenya Power coming back to serve Kenyans in their journey of economic growth.
Okay, so when you look at where Ken Power is now, you see a situation where the company dispenses electricity before it collects payments. And this is something similar to what happened at the time Nigeria had NEPA, or even now with PHCN, leading to lots of estimated billing, which means lots of revenue, billions of Kenyan shillings in revenue being lost. Are there any moves to change this system? You're talking about having a new management team in place, the potential for this 100-year-old company to now finally find its right foot. What's being done to address it? Has this method of service before payments ever really worked for Ken Power?
Well, it hasn't really worked for them for a number of reasons. And the new management is talking about technology. It's talking about ramping up the prepaid service. which you've alluded to, but also looking at broader technologies such as drone technology to look at areas where there's a breakdown in the line system. And they've been able to try to benchmark with utility companies in Italy, in France, and they hope to roll this out to be able to use that kind of technology. I think Kenya Power has a huge strategic advantage in the sense that it supplies power to every household in the country. So even from a data perspective, the amount of data that they sit on is incredibly useful for economic policy and for management. So I think technology might be a game changer. They might need to fix the procurement approach of it, and also need to look at really the cost of the interest rates they are servicing to the banks, which are extremely expensive.
All right, so this week, Ken Power announced that it is writing off 15 billion Kenyan shillings worth of bad debts from unpaid electricity bills, many of them being unpaid for up to 3 months. This is really a massive loss, and you rarely see businesses just throw up their hands, but it seems that that's what the company has done, thrown up its hands and said, there's nothing we can do. So let's talk about it. As a business decision, what's the financial reasoning? What's the foundation? What would be the pros, if any, of making such a decision as this?
Well, it's more of an accounting technique that other sectors like banks do, where you provide for debts that have gone beyond 90 days. So what they're saying is they're creating an accounting framework to cater for that. What it does not mean is that those people who owe that 15 billion will not pay. That's quite the contrary. What they're saying is they're providing for it. So if that money is paid, it will be reflected. But if it's not, they will find a way of just being able to move forward. Because also chasing those payments, particularly with the small payers, the domestic payers, who account for about 60% of that debt, in of itself can be a very expensive process. So it's more of an accounting tool. The collection will continue, but I think it's an opportunity for the company to really be able to separate who are its serious clients and who are not its serious clients, and being able to move forward, particularly with the serious clients.
So this has to beg the question, those who are owing Kenya Power this money, are they continuing to receive electricity, or have they been cut off?
They are continuing to receive electricity, and there are a number of reasons. It's quite a bit complicated, because also we are coming from a COVID pandemic, which has affected many businesses and many households. So it was not in the best interest for the government to disconnect those people as they try to come back on. But there is a big move towards the prepaid technology that is getting quite a bit of traction in terms of, particularly in the city, and we expect to see that technology being rolled out, particularly even in the rural areas.
So you mentioned that as it stands now, household or domestic power users account for 60% of this debt that Kenya Power has. They actually top the list. 20% are SMEs and 10% is actually commercial. And this is a shift, because before it was the large power users, mostly manufacturers, who had been at the top of the defaulters list. When you look at this, is there also a revenue collection problem that Kenya Power has? So whatever the service issues may be, as long as people are getting lights, they're meant to pay for that. Is there a problem with how Kenya Power is able to recoup on the services that it's rendering out, whether it's the domestic or your manufacturers or your SMEs or any other service customer that they have?
There's certainly a problem, and a big part of that is because the manual process is very manual, where many property owners say they've never seen Kenya Power coming to read the meters. What they use is an estimate, an algorithm that really estimates. So you can see that in of itself creates a very inaccurate, a very manual process, because imagine if somebody was out on vacation and really has not lived in that property for 6 months, but yet they have to pay for that kind of power. I think moving forward, they need to take advantage of mobile money. One of the unique things in Kenya is mobile money is very prevalent, and they need to be able to use mobile money to help people make payments, and also use it to make better a better billing cycle using M-Pesa and mobile money. So I think there is technology that can really help them, and the fact that mobile money is very widespread in Kenya, there is no reason why they should continue with such a manual, inaccurate billing process.
All right, so Ken, hold on. When we come back, we'll look at a bit more in terms of all avenues to recover the debt, then also look at what this does to Kenya Power's bottom line as a business that's also meant to make revenue, to also pay salaries and continue to provide a service. So we'll continue that conversation, that side of the conversation, after this break. Kenya Power is writing off 15 billion Kenyan shillings worth of bad debt. What position does this put the company in, and is there a way out? The conversation continues after this. My guest is the chief economist for Mentoria Economics as we look at this risky gamble that Kenya Power is taking concerning its debt. Now, a lot of people would ask the question, has the company exhausted all avenues in trying to recover these debts, the money owed by customers? So Ken, let me ask, can we take customers to court? Can defaulters be taken to court? And you mentioned earlier that it might be a very expensive process in order to pursue those who are owing Kenya Power. So what options are available to the company? Ken?
Well, there are many options that they will try to utilize. Obviously, pursuing it on a case-by-case basis is extremely expensive. It's tedious. It will take time. I think what the company wants is to move forward and to be able to, first of all, clean its books. And that's what the intended move is supposed to do, to help it clean its books so that it can be able to recognize its true assets and not the 15 billion asset that sits in its books. But I think moving forward, I think there's a lot of opportunity, particularly if they partner with the likes of the Kenya Revenue Authority, which in of itself has been trying to get data on households. And that kind of data and that kind of partnership with the Kenya Revenue Authority can end up in a win-win situation where even the Revenue Authority is able to know really the mapping of the population, and Kenya Power is able to use its data in a way that drives economic growth. So I think they still want to maintain a strategic approach, and I think that's the direction that the new management, particularly using technology.
Okay, so while you say it might be expensive to pursue this in terms of getting the money back, and then it might be taken on a case-by-case basis, and that Kenya Power is really looking to look forward, the question has to also be that 5 billion in debt could have been put towards system upgrades, the drones that you're talking about, as well as the prepaid technology. What does this do to the company's bottom line? Yes, we're coming from a COVID era. Yes, there were some leeways given to customers because of the economic impact of the lockdowns and the restrictions. But for this company, what does it do to the bottom line?
Well, there are several factors that affect the bottom line, and I think this should bring us back to the second part of the conversation in the bank loans that Kenya Power is getting from the banking sector, which I feel are highly overpriced. The facility you just mentioned between the three banks will attract a loan origination fee of about $8 million just to originate the loan, and I'm not even talking about the interest payments. So I think they also need to negotiate. They need to get better techniques of negotiating with banks. Otherwise, they'll really end up losing much of their revenue to making interest payments. But the bottom line at the end of the day will be to get as many people connected to the grid, to get Kenyans back to work. Really, that has to be the mission. But there's also talks going on, particularly in some policy spaces around, is there a need to liberalize that space and allow more players to come in? So it's a space that I think in the next 10 years will highly evolve, and I think it'll be very interesting to watch.
So let's stay on this loan conversation. So Kenya Power is writing off these debts at the same time asking for a bailout from the Exchequer, also looking for guarantees from the Treasury to take on board even more loans to finance capital expenditure. There are concerns that if this sort of is approved and this is allowed to go forward, even with the decision the company has made, it opens the door for this to be a reoccurring decision. So first, do you think this writing off of this debt is a one-time decision?
I think you're absolutely spot on. I think it creates a complicated situation. What the IMF has recommended to Kenya is to be able to, particularly with the state-owned agencies like Kenya Airways or for Kenya Power, for them to be able to be back in the black in terms of proper management. But you're right in the sense that it's as Kenya Power continues to write off its assets, but still continues to ask for bailouts and for loans, it puts it in a very precarious situation, not least because of a number of factors. Number one, it's still not sure whether the revenues will continue growing, if people will continue paying, or people will still continue defaulting. That's a big question right now, particularly with households being under pressure because of the COVID pandemic. Number two, it also complicates the situation in the sense that if some of these facilities are dollar denominated, you have that exchange rate risk where if the dollar slides against the shilling, the company really has to pay all that more in terms of interest rate payments. So these are tough questions that the board must be able to tackle, and there is expectation that they will be able to tackle. But I think the first step really has to be around the procurement and the corruption. I think that is where much of the focus will be. There is that feeling that if you can fix the corruption, particularly around procurement, then almost everything else will fall into place.
So you mentioned the fact that this is a space you believe will evolve in the next 10 years. Conversations are already on about opening the space up. Kenya Power right now is responsible for all the electricity in Kenya, and that's not a situation that seems to be able to be sustainable. A 100-year-old company that is still now struggling to find its financial footing. Do you think the company is heading towards a financial crisis, or where would you put the company's financial health as it is now with a new management team, with these opportunities and avenues open before it? How healthy or not do you think Kenya Power is?
Well, I don't think I would call it a crisis because they were able to post a profit in their last cycle. But when you talk about efficiency, when you talk about innovation, some people wonder if it's possible for a public utility to be as innovative. Many people will compare it with the Kenya Post and Telecommunications in the 90s, which had to be broken down and which led to the birth of Safaricom, which is the largest and most profitable entity in East and Central Africa. So a lot of people believe there could be that type of a renewal if you're able to open it up and resemble the European markets where you have multiple providers, and it creates room for choice, for innovation, for competition, and really for a better customer service. And that's what you see in the likes of in the UK, for example.
All right, Ken, we'll end the conversation there. This is really an interesting one because we see a similar situation with Eskom, which probably is one of the worst situations of the continent, as well as PHCN here in Nigeria, and just the electricity access conversation across the continent. It's necessary to see governments start to really address those conversations, and we'll see what happens in the future. Ken, thank you so much. Happy New Year in advance. We know you'll be rocking in the new year before the majority of us on the continent, but don't forget Nigeria is right behind you as we mark 2022. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right. And it's an interesting one, 15 billion KN shillings in debt. Is it really that easy to write off? And is this gamble going to pay off as something that the company can move on from and look to the future? Yes, they made a profit, but the questions of corruption, procurement, and of course efficiency continue to dog Kenya Power. You're watching Business Edge. Up next is NC4 to watch. A few stories we're keeping our eyes on, and we get started in the southern part of the continent where South Africa's utility firm Eskom says that Unit 4 of the Kusile Power Station project has been connected to the national grid, which will contribute an additional 800 megawatts to the country's power system once the unit is fully optimized following a series of tests and other commissioning activities. The unit was first connected on the 23rd of December and will supply electricity intermittently during the testing and optimization phase over the next 6 months before being handed over to the Generation Division to officially be part of the commercial fleet. Airtel Networks Kenya has criticized Kenya Safaricom for seeking to scuttle the recently announced cut in mobile termination rates, accusing the telco of only being interested in protecting its revenue from rivals. MTRs are the charges levied by mobile service providers on other telecommunication service providers for terminating calls in its network. Nigeria's state-owned company, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC, says a total of 249.3 billion naira for October 2021 domestic crude oil sales by 6 multinational oil companies operating in the upstream sector will be paid in January 2022. This came in the latest report on Nigeria's crude oil exports and domestic crude oil sales in the month of October 2021. And finally, some of the statistics are frightening as banking app losses increased by more than 88% last year to an average loss of 14,250 Rand per transaction. Online banking losses increased by more than 44% last year to an average loss of 32,298 Rand per transaction. And there were 9 malware attacks that occurred every second in South Africa. Cybercrimes, including theft of funds resulting from hacking of a bank account, as well as payment cards or mobile wallets, identity theft, cyber extortion, network security liabilities, and more were some of the issues faced. And that's Business Edge, the last Business Edge for the year 2021. Thank you so much for staying with us throughout the year. We hope to see you in 2022 as we continue to keep the business stories, the financial conversations, and the economic discussions about Africa front and center. From all of us here at Business Edge to your family, Happy New Year in advance. We wish you a prosperous one, and we'll see you in January 2022. Do have a good weekend.